The truth is not just in history books. What do you really know about the orphan trains? Most people have never heard of them, but between 1854 and 1929, more than 250,000 children were sent back and forth across the country, without parents, without records, without identities. They were treated like cargo, loaded onto trains and distributed to strangers in 47 states. Children with no names, no families, no history. How can such a crucial part of history be forgotten? And what's more disturbing, what happened to these children? Apparently, the answer never came. But what we do know is that the documents are missing, the stories are lost, and the secrets remain locked away. Let's examine what really happened to these children and why the mystery still remains unsolved today. Between 1854 and 1929, over 250,000 children were sent to the American Midwest in an operation called the Orphan Trains, one of the largest child relocation efforts in American history. They were taken from the streets of eastern cities, often after losing their parents to disease, poverty, or neglect, and were sent to live with families in the Midwest, where they were expected to work on farms. It was a time of chaos and misery. Immigrant families were being crushed by poverty and disease in the big cities, and the government and philanthropic organizations wanted to act. But there was something more in these stories, something that doesn't quite fit. It all started with a man named Charles Loring Brace. He was a Yale-educated minister and came across the children living in the streets of New York. He saw children sleeping in alleyways, forming gangs for protection, getting arrested, and thrown into adult prisons. The problem was so large that authorities were losing control. Brace saw a simple solution: take these children out of the city, put them on trains, and send them to wholesome farming families in the Midwest who needed labor and could provide moral upbringing. He founded the Children's Aid Society, an organization that would become the main one responsible for these orphan trains. In October 1854, the first train left New York carrying 46 children to Michigan. By the end of the week, all 46 had been placed with families. This would be the beginning of a program that would last 75 years. But there was something strange about this process. After all, these children were not just being adopted, they were being treated like goods. The Children's Aid Society was not the only organization involved. Over time, more than 20 different agencies would be involved in operating the trains. The first trip was just the beginning, but the program grew uncontrollably. More trains left, more children were taken from the streets and sent to unknown destinations. The numbers grew, but the records remained weak. This raises a disturbing question. What really happened to all these children? Many reports say that some ended up in loving homes, but how many actually found families? What happened to those who were not chosen? And more importantly, why did no one seem to know where these children came from? To this day, about 97% of the records of the children who participated in this program are either missing or inaccessible. How did this happen? What was hidden? What is the true story behind these orphan trains? The answer is not in the archives, because the archives were never complete. Brace believed he was doing a good thing. He saw the children as a product of their environment, an environment filled with crime, poverty, and neglect. And for some children, he may have been right. Some were placed with loving families, where they grew up and thrived. Two of these children even became governors, showing that for a few the system worked. But when you look closer, the story starts to unravel. How could so many children, from so many different backgrounds, be sent off to live with strangers without any records, without even knowing where they came from? How many were sent to families that didn't want them, to lives they would never have chosen? How many children never saw their siblings again? And how many were never adopted at all, sent to towns where they remained unwanted, cycling from one location to another, only to be overlooked by every family? It's easy to dismiss this as just a tragic chapter in history, to say that the intentions were good and that most children fared well. But something doesn't sit right. There's too much missing, too much lost, too much erased. These children were not just being saved from hardship, they were being systematically removed from their past, from their identities and from their families. And as the years went on, the program grew and the number of children increased. The records kept disappearing. Families erased, names erased, histories erased. How could something so massive have left so little trace? Let's not forget the parallel story happening on the other side of the world. In the United Kingdom, from 1869 to 1948, over 100,000 children were relocated under nearly identical conditions. The British Home Children Programme sent children to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. Much like the Orphan Trains, the children were claimed to be orphans. But two-thirds of them had at least one living parent. They were shipped across oceans without records, without names, without families. The same pattern emerged, and the same fate awaited them in a strange land. No records, no family connections, no answers. Just a name on a list, a face in a crowd. But even when we begin to connect these dots, the answers are still elusive. The institutions that ran these programs, the governments that authorized them, and the agencies that oversaw them, they all failed to keep proper records. They failed to document where the children came from, who they belonged to, and where they went. In the end, the stories of so many children vanished, just as the official records of their existence did. And even today, descendants of these children, living in modern times, still struggle to uncover the truth about their origins. Many have resorted to DNA testing to try and trace their family lines, only to find gaps too wide to bridge, missing links that will never be found. We're left with questions. How could this have happened? Was it negligence or something more? What was the true purpose behind the orphan trains? Were these children really given a chance, or were they simply removed from sight, sent away to be forgotten? And why are so many of the records still sealed, hidden away in archives that remain closed to this day? These children lived in an era where every detail of their lives should have been recorded. The government was compiling detailed census information, capturing data on every family, every person, every community. But the records for the orphan trains were lost. The stories were erased. Why? In the end, we're left with fragments of a much larger story. Pieces of a puzzle that, no matter how hard we try, just don't fit together. The missing records, the sealed archives, the untraceable origins, they all point to something more than just a historical anomaly. Something more than a simple mistake. The pattern is there, it's clear. But the question remains, what is the truth and why has it been kept hidden for so long? As we continue to dig deeper into the story of the orphan trains, it's clear that the truth is buried beneath layers of secrecy and lost records. But some pieces of the puzzle still exist, scattered in archives and personal accounts, waiting to be uncovered. What's more disturbing is that even after all these years, many of the descendants of these children are still left in the dark about their origins. Their families were lost to history, erased from the record, and despite advances in genealogy and DNA testing, they still can't trace their lineages beyond the orphan trains. These children, once given new names and new identities, remain ghosts in the system. The secrecy surrounding the orphan trains isn't just about lost information, it's about control. The children were not just relocated, they were erased from society. Their names were removed, their family ties severed, and their pasts were erased. The program operated in secrecy, and as the years went on, more and more records were destroyed, sealed, or lost. We're left with a fragmented history, a story that doesn't have a clear ending. And yet, there's something unsettling about the pattern that emerges when you connect the dots between the orphan trains, the British Home Children Programme, and the systematic destruction of records. Was this an accident? Was it a coincidence? Or was there something more deliberate happening? The more we uncover, the more questions arise. What was the true purpose behind the orphan trains? Were they really about saving children? Or was it something more sinister? Was it about controlling a population, erasing identities, and creating a new workforce? The children who were sent on these trains were not given the opportunity to have a say in their futures. They were treated as commodities, moved around like cattle, without any regard for their personal stories or histories. Some were lucky enough to find loving homes, but many were not. Many were sent to live with families that didn't want them, and many were abandoned once again. What we do know is that these children's stories have been erased from history, and the institutions that ran the orphan trains continue to keep their records sealed. What were they trying to hide? And why does the truth still remain hidden after all these years? The descendants of these children, who now number in the millions, still carry the scars of their past. They live with the knowledge that their family histories were never recorded, their names never known, and their stories left untold. The question remains, why was it so important to hide their pasts? This isn't just a story about children being relocated. It's about control, manipulation, and the erasure of identities. It's about the deliberate destruction of records, the sealing of archives, and the refusal to answer the questions that still haunt us today. It's about the lives of 250,000 children whose stories were lost to time, whose families were never found, and whose pasts were forever erased. And even now, their descendants are left searching for answers that may never come. The orphan trains may be a forgotten chapter in history, but the questions they raise are far from over. What happened to these children? What happened to their families? And why are the records still hidden after all these years?